Well, welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be talking about argumentative writing and writing an argument. This goes specifically to English 10 assignments. However, the brilliant thing about our English skills is that they cross all content area, because you will be having to write arguments in science and history and current world affairs and a lot of other content areas. And it's always good to be able to have solid argumentation skills when you're talking to friends and family as well. So today what we're going to do is review what an argument is and like the components of an argument, but we're mostly going to be focusing on a very difficult concept to grasp for students, generally, which is the counterclaim and rebuttal. But I'm hoping to break it down into a really simple way for you to go, okay, here's my checklist and this is what I need to do in order for you to become comfortable enough to rock your assignment and to handle any arguments that you might have to write in the future. So there will also be times that I'm asking for engagement. I'm hoping you're able to respond back to me. And besides that, I'm actually going to have a sample argument, very current for the season. And then I have some questions for you that you can take into your assignment when you go to write it. And hoping that will help you. So to get started, let's review some really important words that have to do with an argument. The biggest thing is you cannot be a fence rider. You have to stake your side and make a claim to it. So the statement, the claim is just a statement the writer is trying to prove is true. And it can be anything that you can argue. As long as there's two sides to the issue, you can argue it. Is pizza or ice cream better? Which is one of the topics that you're going to see in your assignments, is you have to decide whether or not pizza or ice cream is better. Should pineapple go on pizza? That's a very popular topic, right? But they can also be really heavy hitters. Things like what another topic in our assignments have to do with President Trump's President Trump's travel ban, or whether or not you're pro-life or pro-choice. So you can make those statements, and those are pretty serious arguments, but you can still use the same things for the lighthearted arguments like pineapple and pizza, or the big heavy hitters that you probably at some point in your life are going to get into discussing. So after the claim, you really want to remember what an argument is. You're not trying to bash the other side. You're not trying to use fallacies, which you're learning about in English 10 as well. But those are like false arguments where you're blaming someone else, or you're using false argumentation, or you're using incorrect data, or you're trying to focus on something that really isn't the issue. You want to avoid those. You want to use good arguments to prove your point and why your side is the logical, correct choice. You want to avoid name calling and doing the bashing to the other side. It's really important in an argument, because most of us, when we start hearing people say negative things and attacking us, we just shut down and we're done. So it's better and more argumentative and more convincing if you use the correct tone to come across as respectful and say, this is what I think and I wish you would believe me too, kind of idea. Now, you do the argument through two big things. You have to provide evidence. You're going to give a credible source or a fact or some kind of logic or example to prove your point. And that is your evidence. And then the big one where students tend to kind of not realize how big they should go is under your explanation. And in the lessons, these are called your commentaries, where you comment on why you think your evidence proves your point and what your thinking is, and you explain yourself. And so those are really, really important elements to remember when we start talking about argument. So again, your claim, take a side, state it clearly which side you are on. I know a lot of us tend to be in the middle on issues, but in order to correctly argue, you need to take one side or the other. Remember, in an argument, we approach it with respect, and we are using evidence and some type of reasoning behind our argumentation. We give them evidence, and then we need to explain ourselves. So that's the general idea, and there are a lot of ways to argue. You can give a problem and a solution, like here's a problem and here's what I think is the solution. You could give what I love, which is a causal chain. And what this is a technique where it's the give a moose a muffin kind of concept, where you're like, this event leads to this event, which leads to this event, and it's going to snowball out of control, right? And that kind of proves a point without needing necessarily data or something like that. It's more for a situation that you're trying to fix. Like maybe if you're asked if students should start school an hour earlier, and you'd give like a snowball effect, that causal chain of having to wake up earlier and how that impacts your whole day. So those would be other types of writing forms for your argument. But the one I find that students struggle with, but is one of the most effective ways to argue, is to explain why the other side is incorrect in their thinking. So, and that is called a counterclaim and a rebuttal. It goes together, just like problem and solution goes together. So first you need to understand what these two things are. And we're going to look closely at the counterclaim and the rebuttal, but it is essentially an entire paragraph where you're going to provide a counterclaim and then use a rebuttal to show where they're wrong. So a counterclaim is exactly that. It means the opposite of your claim. It is stating a claim from the other side, and not in order to agree with it, but to show how it's wrong. So you want to state a claim from the other side, and by doing this, you recognize that the other side of the debate, and when you say, you know what, I hear your point, and I see how that's a valid argument. However, here's where I'm still confused, or where I think your logic and your thinking kind of goes off kilter or is incorrect. And so when you recognize another side's point of view, it strengthens your argument because you're open to other people's opinions. So more respect for you as a writer and a thinker. I respect people who are open to listening to my ideas a lot more than I respect people who might not want to listen to my ideas. And the people who will listen are the ones who will convince me much more easily than those people who just are constantly pounding on their like their soapbox. So again, I know I kind of rambled a bit there. That was a lot of information. But a counterclaim is just looking at the other side's claim. And it doesn't have to be all their claims. You pick one that you feel like you can easily or argue well. Because the other part of the paragraph, after you present their counterclaim, what they might say, you have to prove why what they say is wrong. So you want to choose a claim that you're able to actually explain why they're wrong with. So a counterclaim, again, is just stating the other side's point or what their main argument might be. So and I have a sheet and a link at the end of this. I'm going to put in my email if you want this lesson or this PowerPoint with the link. It has all of these pieces of transitions and these examples or these STEM starters for you if you would like the worksheet. It's a really great tool in order to make this easier to do. So I'm going to actually pop ahead because I feel like after I'm looking at this that we might want to see what an example is before I discuss it. So I do want to come into this, but I want to show you an example. We're going to look at my end result paragraph, just so that you can, and I'm going to read it to you, but I'm really just going to focus on the first part because we're just doing the counterclaim, but I want you to see how it starts the paragraph. So topic sentence is, some people may say that Santa does not exist. However, I believe in Santa and argue that it is the definition of what Santa is that causes the true debate over his existence. Many non-believers claim no one could possibly make reindeer fly and travel around the world in 24 hours. It is physically impossible. These non-believers are difficult to refute. The laws of physics and time make the story of Santa implausible. Yet this only holds true if you define Santa as the jolly big-bellied man in red who laughs loudly and carries his list of naughty and nice children. So that is my, it's actually two parts, but that is my counterclaim. If you note, let me get in here with the annotations. I'm going to point some things out, and then we're going to go back to my slide that demonstrates what to do. Okay, so I need to move my little box here. So some people may say that Santa does not exist. However, I believe in Santa and argue that it is the definition. So that's how I'm going to talk about this issue and this claim. So many non-believers claim, remember I have said, I believe I said, and if not, I'm saying it now, you should always have evidence. So actually give a direct quote from a non-believer or the other side. So that's what this is. And this part right here is an introduction using specific keywords that tells the reader that this is a counterclaim. And what it is that tells us that are these things. It is, some people may say, and I believe. This part right here is the counterclaim. Oh, you can't see that. Let me change the color real quick. This is the counterclaim. I'm going to just put count. Okay? The counterclaim is what some people might say. My rebuttal is what I believe. So that's over here. Okay? Now, this is just the topic sentence. However, it tells our reader that we are now looking at a counterclaim and a rebuttal paragraph. So we're going to look at the other side and prove them wrong, which is the goal of a counterclaim and rebuttal. And I'm going to do that by using a direct quote, which remember, so we avoid plagiarism, put the direct quote in quotation marks. Okay? So those are the main parts, and I'm going to go back to my other slide to discuss what those parts are. But to review really quick, the things I underlined is the whole counterclaim. Okay? The parts I circled in yellow are my counterclaim and my rebuttal. And the last part that you really need to include in the this portion of the paragraph is a direct quote, which I've also circled in red with the quotation marks. Okay, so I'm going to move backwards really quick in my PowerPoint so that, oops. Okay, so that we can look at the expectations of what you need to do. So the basic starter, which is where I recommend most students start, is some people may say that, and you state your thesis, what your claim is. Some people may say that Santa is not real. Some people may say that pineapple belongs on pizza. So some people may say that pineapple belongs on, or does not belong on pizza would probably be the way you would say that, because pineapple is a fruit. However, this is wrong because pineapple just makes it sweeter and more delicious, if that's going to be your argument. The first sentence right here, the some people may say, that is going to be your counterclaim setup. So in your topic sentence, you need to set up that it is a counterclaim and a rebuttal. So that first line here sets up the counterclaim. And the second line here, this however this is wrong because, helps you set up your rebuttal. This starter is how you should start a counterclaim and rebuttal paragraph. And when you do that, it tells your reader what it is and what you're trying to accomplish. And it's a beautiful topic sentence. It tells everything that you're going to talk about in the paragraph. No matter where, no matter what, if you use that simple starter, you're going to be able to cover everything you discuss in this paragraph. So that's really important. So the other choices for your starter, you don't have to use that. It's kind of generic, but that is the easiest way to do it and most clear-cut way. But some will say that blank is not true because, some people might say that, some will argue. Those on the other side of the issue may say that it's true that. There's all of these different things. Admittedly, oops, I do this. So those are the different examples. And again, at the very end of the PowerPoint, there is a link for a document that allows you to have a list of these available. Hi, Sabrina. Thank you for joining. I'm hoping you can hear me. If you can click yes or thumbs up, that way we can make sure you can hear me, and then I will review the core of what we've talked about so far. Or Sabrina, you could also give me a message just with a yes, or you can unmute and say hi. That would work as well, whatever works for you, just so I know you can hear me. Let me try. Oh, awesome. Welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight. We are talking about counterclaims and rebuttals, which are a form of argument. So I'm gonna just review what I've talked about so far. And I'm gonna go back in my slides so you can see that really quick, okay? So an argument is just where you're trying to prove your point. And the best ways to do it are, there's a lot of different ways, but things to remember, I think is where I was going with that, is that you want to remember that you need a strong claim. You have to be on one side of the issue or the other. It can be anything from fun, as in which I'm talking about for the lesson, and the example is whether or not Santa Claus is real. And then, or you could go on to the serious side, which is one of the assignments for English 10, which has to do with if you agree or disagree with President Trump's travel ban. So there's a lot of different things we can argue, and there's a lot of ways we argue. We can argue in English classes, history classes, or just sitting around the table with friends and family. So knowing how to do that and how to convince people that your thinking is right is really a useful tool. And one of the things I want students to always remember is that arguing, it is important, especially in today's world, to remember that when you're willing to respect and hear what others are saying, they respect and hear what you're saying more. So the tone of your argument should be more academic and respectful, because it opens people up to being willing to hear you. And then the other two terms before I talk about the counterclaim and rebuttal I want to review is evidence and explanation. You want to bring evidence in. Those are things that are direct quotes. You can do some research, find some data, and you can quote it. And that is what we call concrete details when we are looking at our English essays and all of our English responses that we do. Evidence is a form of a concrete detail. You can also provide a really good example if you need to, instead of like data. And then you want to explain how that data influences your thinking, or how that data helps support your argument, depending on which part of the counterclaim and rebuttal paragraph you're doing. So I hope that was a very fast review, but if you can, again, just give me a thumbs up before you can move on, or if you have any questions on this slide before I move on. Awesome. Okay, so let's look at the counterclaims and rebuttals. Counterclaims and rebuttals are just one way to organize your argument. And what that means is we have lots of ways we do it. A couple of the ways we could do them are like problem and solution, where you present a problem and you give a solution, and you try to argue that your solution is the best. One of the most effective ways is called a counterclaim rebuttal, and it is a whole paragraph. And in the paragraph, you have your topic sentence. You're going to give what the counterclaim is, and then you're going to explain how that counterclaim is wrong, which is the rebuttal. But to understand all that, you need to understand what a counterclaim and a rebuttal are. So a counterclaim is just what it says. You're going to take the opposite of your claim. So if you believe that Santa is real, the counterclaim would be someone saying that Santa is not real, and why. Okay, so that would be a really good example. And so it's, all it does is state, I know this is what you're thinking, so here's what I've heard other people from the other side say, and now this is what's wrong with that. So the counterclaim is just recognizing what the other side says. And when you recognize what the other side is saying, if you think about human nature, when you hear, I hear what you're saying, it makes you more open to listening because they're listening to you as well. And so by saying, I hear, or the other side believes this, and I kind of can see where they think that that's accurate. However, by recognizing the other side, you're opening up a much better debate because people are now willing to hear what you're saying. So offering up the other side and then showing how that thinking is wrong is a really strong form of writing. So again, counterclaims, before I move on really quick, is just stating what the other side says. And the genius part is, it works if you do this for a counterclaim, it works as your topic sentence. And there are some starters, and this is where we were when you entered. So there are what I call sentence starters. They're just easier ways to remember how to start a counterclaim, because I'm very guilty of the hardest thing to do is just start. So if you have a way to start a counterclaim, it makes it a lot easier. And at the end of this PowerPoint, and if you leave me your email, I can email you the file. There's actually a really great document that I put together that has these listed in them for you, so you don't have to write them down as notes. But the basic way to start a counterclaim is to say something like, some people may say that Santa is not real because, and then you give your reason why. However, so that is your beginning of your counterclaim. But in your topic sentence, you also want to claim what the rebuttal is. However, this is wrong because, and then you give your reasons why you think it's wrong. And I know that that might get a little confusing right now, but I am hoping when I show you my example, it'll make a lot more sense. Other ways you can do this, this like transition into counterclaims and rebuttals, is these other choices. Things like, some people might say this, but I say this. It's true that one group says this, however, this is the correct information, right? There's all these different ways you can do that. And you want to think of them kind of like transitions, which are those words at the beginning of sentences that help the reader move from one idea into another. So, so that is the way to start a counterclaim and a rebuttal paragraphs. And I'm going to give you an example of what the counterclaim looks like. Remember, a counterclaim and a rebuttal go together to make the whole paragraph. So as we go through my examples, we're going to look at the counterclaim first and then look at the rebuttal and put them all together at the end so that you can see what the full paragraph looks like. Okay? Before I move on, actually, let me show you the example first so it might help you visualize it a little bit better, and then I'll check in and see if you have any questions, okay? So this is my example of this would work as my topic sentence or my first couple sentences in my paragraph, and I am looking at whether or not Santa is real. That is my topic. So some people may say that Santa does not exist. However, I believe in Santa and argue that it is the definition of what Santa is that causes the true debate over his existence. So that is those sentence starters that I just talked about. If you look at this, we have some people may say, and then we have the I believe in Santa, like however I believe in Santa. Okay, so there's that first part. So those are our sentence starters. So I'm going to go back so that you're able to see that. I'm going to go back one more and go over some other components. The counterclaim is part of your topic sentence. I think students think it has to happen further down into the paragraph, but the best way to do it is to actually start right in there almost with your counterclaim rebuttal statement, your sentence starter statement, and then just lay it out there. It doesn't need to have all this build up. Just state what the other side says. And then you generally want to use some kind of quote or evidence as your concrete detail. Now, the Santa one, I actually did look up a quote from someone that might be reliable to try to see what a non-believer might say for Santa, but I just kind of came up with a general statement that most people would say why Santa couldn't be real. So I don't have like a direct quote, though I do say what they say and I put it in quotation marks. So again, to go back to my sample, here is our opener, our sentence starter for the counterclaim. Here is the sentence starter, so to speak, for our rebuttal portion. And then if you look at this, I have included Connor, John, Connor, I'm on a live class. Sorry about that. These two areas right here are your quotations, so our direct quote. Okay, so this is where you would put in a direct quote. I wanted to make sure I gave you an example, even with the Santa Claus topic. All right, so do you have any questions right now? Or is there anything that I could help clarify in the way I described it? Awesome. Okay, so let's move on to the next part, which is going to be the rebuttal. So the counterclaim is about the top 1/3 of your paragraph, and then our rebuttal is going to be the other 2/3 of the paragraph. Hi, Rebecca. Thank you for joining us. I just finished going over counterclaims, and then I'm going over rebuttals. So I'm going to keep going with the rebuttal, and then at the end, I'll go back and make sure you understood counterclaims if you don't catch on, like as I go through, because we'll see the counterclaim again, okay? And welcome to the class, and thanks for joining us tonight. So a rebuttal is the second part of the main, the second part of the paragraph, but it is the main part of the paragraph. I think students sometimes get caught up in presenting the counterclaim that they forget that the really important part, the part your teachers and other people want to hear, is what you have to say, and that happens in the rebuttal. So always make sure that your words are the like star of the show, so to speak, and that you focus on the rebuttal part of your counterclaim and rebuttal paragraphs. And all a rebuttal is, it means to refute. The rebuttal is the portion in like a technical and official debate where people get to disagree with the other side and to explain to them why they feel that the other side is wrong. And so you're refuting what they say. You're just proving why the opposition's claim is incorrect. And you want to try to do this more with logic. You definitely want to avoid name calling or telling them that their data is just totally fake and wrong. You need to look at what they say and explain with logic and explanation why you feel that they're wrong. And remember that tone is really important. If you start pointing fingers and name calling, people are going to shut down and they aren't going to listen to you. And if they're not listening to you, you cannot influence the way they think. So keep influencing them by keeping the correct tone and by approaching it in a logical manner, because it's hard to beat logic and clear thinking. So let's look at how then to do a rebuttal. So there's, again, I'm leaving this, the basic choices, your sentence starters, because they are both counterclaim and rebuttal, right? The first part would be your counterclaim. The second part is that transition into your rebuttal. You're going to use that second transition to get into your rebuttal. You want to always clearly state, these are my thinkings and this is why your thinking is incorrect. If needed, you want to create a bridge to connect the two ideas, and I'll demonstrate that in my paragraph. But when you see the word bridge, when you're looking at like an outline or in an essay, just remember all bridges do are connect. Instead of just like a single transitional word, generally bridges are connecting big ideas to each other, and it might take a sentence or two to be able to do that. So when you see that word bridge, just remember that. Just kind of take a little bit more time to transition. So then the rebuttal, again, is that major portion of your argument. I, as a teacher, want to hear from you and your thinking. It's so much more important than just what the other side's thinking. I want to know why and how you think the other side or the counterclaim is incorrect. So remember to let your words shine, and they should take up the majority of the paragraph. So the rebuttal should be the majority of it. You should also include direct evidence here. You want to find other people who agree with you. And so I have a quote I'm going to show you how to do that with. And it's really important if I am going to talk about something that's really close and personal to me. I have a son who's a type 1 diabetic. And so helping fund and find a cure is a big deal. And if I was writing an argumentative response to someone on why we need more funding for it, I would definitely use support from other people or families who are diabetic, but even some numbers on how devastating and expensive the disease is and that kind of thing. That support proves your point and it supports you. If you think of an argument as a scale, you want as many things on your side of the scale as possible to weigh on your side, right? So the more evidence you can give to show how your side is correct, the more likely it is that you're going to win, so to speak, or at least present a very solid and good argument. Okay? So use that evidence, and then remember to explain how your evidence proves your point. Don't just plunk a quote in there and expect your reader to know exactly what you wanted us to think about that quote. I have a lot of students who find an amazing quote and then they don't talk about it. And so it kind of, it comes back to that idea that your words are more important. All the evidence in the world, though it helps, what you do with the evidence is really important. So you want to make sure you're always talking about it. So if I gave like data about the cost of diabetes, I would then maybe explain how hard it is for families with a type 1 diabetic child to pay for their medicine, and the medicine saves their lives. So you want to make sure that you're talking about the evidence that you provide and making it mean something to your argument, okay? So let's look at the rebuttal example that I have. I'm actually going to float backwards really quick so that you can see and be reminded of what the counterclaim is. So this would be my topic sentence and my first couple sentences for the counterclaim, which, so for Rebecca, a counterclaim is just stating what the other side might think, okay, or say. Some people may say that Santa does not exist. However, I believe in Santa and argue that it is the definition of what Santa is that causes the true debate over his existence. Many non-believers claim no one could possibly make reindeer fly and travel around the world in 24 hours. It is physically impossible. So that's what other people might say. That's my counterclaim. So if we look back and go now to my part, the rebuttal, I am going to add, these non-believers are difficult to refute. The laws of physics and the time make the story of Santa implausible. Yet this only holds true if you define Santa as the jolly, big-bellied man in red who laughs loudly and carries his list of naughty and nice children. If instead you define Santa as a spirit, a feeling of generosity that embodies the meaning of the holiday spirit, then it's easier to see how Santa does exist. He exists in the actions and feelings of all believers who know it is give than receive. Charles W. Howard said it best when he said, "They err who think Santa enters through the chimney. He enters through the heart." Santa Claus is just a symbol, a physical representation of the joy and generosity that is vital to the Christmas season. Each time we cause joy, each gift we hunt for with the hope of inciting joy, each act of kindness we give makes Santa real. So that is my rebuttal. And so remember the things I said. It needs to be bigger than my counterclaim, which this definitely is. I need to make sure that I'm using my transition, and I've created a bridge to do so. So in this section right here, I am going to talk about and make that connection that Santa isn't, it depends on how you define Santa, right? It's really hard to argue that Santa is absolutely real when you look at the logic of the stuff. But when you look at what Santa means and whether or not that feeling is true, that's how I figured I could argue whether or not Santa is real. So this was purposely done to argue more correctly, or more efficiently, and actually, like, in order to argue well, I guess. I state why they're correct. It's very hard to argue with the laws of physics and time, correct? And I actually tell them that. But what I do is I transition in these first 5 lines, that's my bridge. And instead of discussing just physically whether or not the man in the red suit is running around the earth in 24 hours, we transition to the concept that it is more about what he means that makes him real. And that's what my bridge does. And that's how I'm going to argue it. So then I go in and I add my next thing, which is you should always have evidence of support, right? This in our lessons in English is called not commentary, concrete details. So this is evidence, and I'm really bad with this writing pen. Sorry about that. So this is our evidence, and it just shows other people think the way I think. And then I explain what that means. It's not just that he's physical, he's a symbol, he's an emotional thing that we're trying to share the idea of generosity and kindness in the season. And when we do that, everyone who perpetuates or does the actions of Santa makes him real. So that is how I organized my argument. Again, I have these non-believers are difficult to refute. It means to go against. That's my transition, and I move into it, yet it's only true if you define Santa this way, where I just underlined right here. I'm going to star it as well for you. That moves into more what I'm thinking, and so the reader knows that I'm talking about how I'm rebutting or refuting their counterclaim. And then I go into explaining it and finding my evidence down in these 2 parts at the very bottom. So that was a lot, and I'm not quite done, but I want to pause because it was a lot and see if there's any help that I can give you guys, or if you have any questions for Sabrina or Rebecca. And if you can either answer or give me a thumbs up. The thumbs up you can actually click by checking participants, and it gives you some options. Or you could send me a chat, or send them to from everyone, or just from you, or to you, or excuse me, to everyone, or I can receive it just from you. Cool. Okay, I got Rebecca, and then Sabrina, are you okay too? Awesome. Okay. Now I'm going to, I know that Rebecca, because she's marked no, Sabrina, can you click on where it says participants, and I'll give you some options, okay? I'm going to ask you, we're going to use yes for counterclaim and no for rebuttal, okay? So I'm going to ask you about something, and if you can click the yes or click the no. So remember, yes is the counterclaim, no is the rebuttal, okay? So which part of a counterclaim and rebuttal paragraph states the other side? So click yes, or write yes if you would rather type it, for the counterclaim, or no for the rebuttal. Which part states the other side's opinion? If you want, you can just type counterclaim and rebuttal into the chat as well, or C or R. I'm okay with either way. Just let me know so I can check in with you guys. Okay. I got Sabrina's answer. Rebecca, I'm not sure if you answered again and it's just showing the same response, if that makes sense. Could you put a Y or an N in the chat box? Or a C, I mean, either way, so counterclaim would work or rebuttal, whichever your answer is. I wonder if I can. Okay, I'm going to, so to the other side is stating the counterclaim. So it would be the yes button. So counterclaims restate other people's opinion, right? The other side's opinion. So that's the counterclaim. So then the part where you prove why you're right and they're wrong, why their thinking is wrong, would be called the rebuttal. Okay, so remember, counter means the opposite of what you think, and then rebuttal means to go against. So if you can remember those two things, that will be a good solid place to start from. Okay. All right. So let's look really quickly at. Let me clear some stuff here real quick. We're going to look at the next. Awesome. Okay. Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, so this is my whole paragraph. I do want to just very quickly highlight a couple things. I'm going to show you first in yellow where the counterclaim is. So C for counterclaim, okay? That goes from here to right here, okay? And then my rebuttal, I'm going to put in red, R for rebuttal. That goes from here all the way almost down to the very bottom. Okay. Now, the other thing, though, is part of my rebuttal, I'm going to put this in purple, is the bridge. I'm just going to kind of underline that. This is my connection to how I'm connecting the two concepts, right? How I'm going from the counterclaim to the rebuttal. And then I'm also going to put in green I'm going to circle them. Always want to use evidence, right? It is really important to back up what you say with evidence. And you should also put the counterclaim as evidence as well. So the green is evidence, okay? Now, finally, so we have a counterclaim, we have the rebuttal, we have a bridge which connects everything, we have our evidence. We also have, I'm gonna use orange. We have a lot of commentary. So this section here is commentary. And then there is, you can kind of call some of this up here commentary where the bridge is, but I actually don't recommend to students that they put commentary on the counterclaim because that's what your rebuttal is. So you can avoid that commentary concept. If you remember in English, we have our topic sentence, concrete detail, commentary, concrete detail, commentary, and then a conclusion. Well, that's what we kind of have here. We have, I'm going to do this in darn it, we're gonna have to do peach because I'm running out of colors. So this is our topic sentence right here. This piece right here is our concrete detail, CD, okay? And then down here, we don't have a commentary, which is okay. Then I have another concrete detail right here. And this part is going to be your commentary, right? And then the last thing to have on a solid paragraph is a conclusion right here. And so by writing this format, where you have a counterclaim as your topic sentence, and you provide an evidence, and then you give a concrete detail and evidence for your rebuttal, and then you have commentary, and then you have a concluding sentence. You've created a strong paragraph, and you have created and added in your counterclaim and your rebuttal. Okay? So let's move to the next slide. How do you do this? These are things, and I am more than happy to send this PowerPoint to you guys so you can have this, and it has a link for a great document. How do you do this? The way you do this is by asking yourself these 4 questions. This is how you get started. You are going to then have to go in and find the evidence. But I think the problem with most students is, how do you even start? If you start this way and think of these things, you're going to write a solid paragraph with the counterclaim and rebuttal. What will you convince your audience to do in your speech? What is one reason people may disagree with you, or you may not want to, or why they may not want to make this change? Number 2 is really important, right? Finding out what that counterclaim is. So once you've done number 2, you're going to use one of those sentence starters back on that slide to help you state your counterclaim. Once you've done that, you need to decide how you're going to argue it and use another sentence starter for the rebuttal. Using those sentence starters are going to help you more quickly and easily just write out your argument, because I do believe students know why they are against it. Even when people say they give a counterclaim, you know why you think that that's wrong thinking. It's just hard sometimes to put that in words. So if you start with those sentence starters, it's really going to help. Okay? And let's see, I think the last thing is just my the Google Doc that has all this information in it, and it has an example. It has an example argumentative paragraph that uses a counterclaim and a rebuttal. So you'll be able to see all of this and everything we talked about. So Sabrina, if you want to email or send me a chat with your email in it, I'm more than happy to send that document to you. And I'm going to actually write down really quick in a chat my email. So if you would rather email me that way, you're more than welcome to do so. And that, I know we're a little bit over, but I got started later due to some technicalities. Okay, Sabrina, I will, since I have it, I will email it to you right when we're done, okay, since you got that in there. Do you have any questions for me on any other assignment that you might have, Sabrina? Okay, I hope tonight was really helpful. I really appreciate that you joined us. I love getting to meet students this way, and I hope that this was a helpful lesson for you. If you have any questions about any of your topics in language, please email me. I'm really open to helping. I'm glad it was helpful. Thank you very much. Please email me. I'm really fast at emails, and I respond throughout the day, and I really love helping students. So please make sure to email me if you have questions. So I think that's it, and I'm very happy that you joined us, and I hope you have a great night.